Okay, why don't we get started? This is Mike Salisbury. I'm the director of Quantrix. We also have James Kipling, the product manager for Quantrix, here with us today, and we're very pleased to welcome you to our Release 19.1.0 webinar with specific emphasis on our new data import feature, which we're very excited to show you. I will be monitoring the webinar logistics, so to speak. So if you have a question during the webinar, in the webinar control panel, there's a questions chat box. So I'll be monitoring that during the webinar. If you have a question, please feel free to ask it. I may answer you back directly in the chat, or I may wait and ask that question during James' presentation. We are scheduled for about 90 minutes. We are going to be recording this as well. And so if you do need to leave, or if you want to watch it again, we'll be sure to post it up on our website and YouTube channel as soon as we can. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, James Kipling, and he'll be leading you through the exciting new features of version 19.1.
Thanks, Mike. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. So to start off, I just wanted to give you some information about our 19.1.0 release. As you're probably well aware, these are both major releases for both Quantrix Modeler and Quantrix Cloud. They were a long time in the making. There's a lot that's gone into them, but the overall themes for each of those releases are obviously the data import overhaul, of which is going to be the topic of this webinar. Some other surrounding improvements around SVG image handling and some various ease of use improvements within the modeler application. And then on the Quantrix Cloud side of things, obviously a lot of work has gone in to support the data import work, as well as some user administration improvements and various performance upgrades. So I wanted to start off with the motivation behind why we did the data import overhaul. So it was a lot of feedback we got during our conferences that data links takes too long to configure imports. In fact, the wizard had over 13 pages in some situations, and there was too many checkboxes and specific options with very specific language, which made it okay if you've been using Quantrix for a long time, but for a new user to get up and running and understand what's going on, it just made the overall experience less than optimal. So we had a motivation to build a modern architecture that we could build further improvements on going forwards. We wanted to emphasize ease of use by adding a drag and drop interface, and we wanted to make it easy to reuse previously configured data imports. So what we decided to do was work on a phased approach. So combining our two data import tools currently in Quantrix. Some of you may be familiar with both, some of you maybe have only used Data Link, but they have pros and cons of each of them. What we started to do was figure out how could we combine the best of both Data Link and Data Nav to create data import, as well as add some new functionality from our voice of customer. So with the release of Quantrix 19.1.0, we have incorporated all of the data nav functionality into data import, as well as much of the data link functionality. And moving forwards towards the 19.2 release, we intend to have one way to bring data into Quantrix, and that's going to be data import. So there are a few features missing from data import right now that data link still has. So data link will still be in there until 19.2, but then we will be transferring everything over to data import. In terms of legacy conversion, so your existing models, pre 19.1.0, you would have had models with both data links and data navs. Upon upgrading to 19.1.0, there'll be an automatic conversion of any data nav data imports. They will get converted automatically into data imports. However, your data links will still remain. It's not until 19.2.0 where we'll perform a legacy migration of all of your existing data links. So what this provides us is a nice way to do a phased approach into introducing data import. So today's demo, we're going to do a few things. We're going to demonstrate connecting to different data sources, configuring the data import matrices using the new drag and drop configuration. We're going to have a discussion around the new data browser, and then I'm going to give you some things to note going forwards. So with that in mind, I'm going to open up there. I just want to check, Mike, that that's gone to my Quantrix Modeler application correctly.
Yes, you're good to go.
Perfect. So the first thing I just wanted to briefly show you was the conversion from an existing data nav source. So if you were to go and open a model which had a legacy data nav table, you may be prompted with an option when this opens to convert that data source. So it can take a little bit of time. We just need to make sure everything's converting properly. But you can just select that yes button there, and Quantrix will automatically begin the conversion process. And you can see it's converting these here to data imports with the new configuration buttons, and we'll cover these in the demo. Can take a little bit of time, but there we go. That's now converted all of those legacy data nav tables. So with a blank model, we're going to start off with a new data import. So data import is based off a similar technology to data nav. It uses our column store technology, which is ultra fast. It makes importing data extremely quick, and it has various benefits when it comes to connecting different imports to the same source, in that we don't have to bring in that data every time for every different import. We can cache some of that data in an encrypted column store file and make that very quick. So the first thing we're going to do is just connect to a text file. If I go here, we usually want to give our data source a name. So I'm just going to call this purchase data. And then I'm going to go and browse for a file. So I'm going to go to this webinar file, and I'm going to select this CSV data. It's got 20,000 rows of purchase data. Now, obviously, this is a limited text data file, but if you're using a fixed width file, you can just change this here, and you'll get a different configuration panel for the fixed width files. But we're using a delimited data file. This panel is resizable, so if you need to get a bigger view and have a look at what text you've got in there, or what data you've got in there, you can easily resize that. And we've also made some improvements to the data type recognition, so it should figure out what data types your data is much better than it did in data link or data nav. We can also access the advanced options by clicking the drop down here. If we needed to change, for example, the encoding or the text qualifier, you can access all of those. But for this example, we're going to keep things simple. You can also rename columns before you bring them into Quantrix. So for example, if we wanted to change this column AMT into contract amount, we can. And we could also change date to purchase date. And you can resize these columns as well to get a good look at your data. So if you consider the traditional way of using data link and having to step through the wizard, maybe going backwards and forwards until you get your data looking how you wanted it, you're going to see now why we've really gone down this route. I've just selected my file. Quantrix has done a lot of the hard work, and I press OK. What that's going to do is that's going to create a new data import matrix, and it's going to show me my available fields. Every time you bring in a data import, you'll start with one category, and this is all rows. So you can drag, for example, units over here into the fields column and drop it in. That will complete the drop and drop in the units for all 20,000 rows of that. You could also double click on a field, and that will bring it in again as a data item. You could also use the shift key to shift select maybe 2 or more different fields, and you can then drag and drop them in, place them where you want, and it will import those fields as well. Or lastly, you can just double click on the table itself, drag the whole table in itself, and that will import all of those fields as a two-dimensional import. You can easily search for fields if you have multiple fields within this source. So if we wanted to search for a region, you can see we can kind of filter down to the fields we're trying to find, as well as use data type filters. So if we wanted to search only for numbers, text, or dates, you can easily filter down to the fields you need. Okay. So once you've done your configuration, the only thing that's left to do is to click this complete configuration down in the bottom right, and that will save your configuration as an import matrix. And now you can use this matrix as you do with any other matrix in Quantrix. In order to access configuration again, you can access it from this cog down here, or you can go to configure data in the data tab, data menu bar, sorry, and that will take you back into the configuration page. So the next thing we're going to take a look at is the data browser. So if you've been using data nav, you may be familiar with the data browser. It's a way of displaying the data sources within a model. We've made some improvements to the way that we use the data browser. So if we open up the data browser using the menu data browser, you'll see just down here, the screen's gone a little bit slow, there we go. You'll see just down here that we've got a new and improved data browser. So right now in this model, we have one data source. You'll see that indicated by this kind of green hamburger icon here called purchase data. And then under that source, we have a query. So we're making one query into that source. So often you have to have a one source of data that you might make different queries into. Maybe you want to summarize the data differently or bring different types of data from the same source in. We've made that really easy in Quantrix to add a new query from an existing data source. You simply right-click on the source and select Create New Import Matrix. That will create a new import matrix showing you those same rows. And here, instead of a 2D matrix, we might want to create a multi-dimensional analysis. So let's just give our initial one the name 2D import, and then maybe we'll say here that actually we want to do a sales analysis. So the scenario is I want to summarize my sales figures by product and by region. To do this, I can just drag the products into, for example, the column tray, and I could drag my region into the row tray there. I can drag my amount, which is contract amount, into the data item category. And you'll see that here that I'm presented with a summarizer. So right now we are summarizing the contract amounts for region and product, but you can easily switch this over to many of the other summarizers that we offer here. So it's very quick to change these summarizers over. You don't need to go through 7 different panels in order to switch your summarizers. You can also add the same item twice. So for example, if I wanted to have the total contract amount and maybe the average contract amount, you can bring multiple fields in twice. So we might call this total sales, and we might call this average contract. Another improvement we've added to data import is the ability to group items based on fields. So if we wanted to see, for example, how much an individual sales rep is closing in a specific region, the thing you might have done in the past is to take a sales rep, add it as a category, and what you end up with is a rather sparse matrix. So for example, Tom and Mike didn't have any sales in the rest of world, so all of these rows here are going to be blank. So instead of dragging that field in as a category, what we can do now in data import is take a field and just drop it on the items we wish to group. And this will create a much more efficient, more correct grouping of those items. So you can see here, we're grouping the region items by sales rep.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in there, James. This is a great new feature that wasn't available in DataNav either. The ability to group and the ability to group visually. I think one of the things was always a challenge for new users and even experienced users was in that data link panel, trying to figure out the hierarchy and which column is going to be grouped in which category, and it was just pretty tedious. So this is a really great new improvement that I'm really excited about, and I'm already starting to use in my models. And I just wanted to chime in for folks that may have joined us late. Feel free to use the questions chat box or the chat box in the webinar control panel. If you have any questions during the webinar, I'll be happy to answer those in the chat box, or I'll break in and have James answer the question. And we will try to leave a little bit of time at the end of the presentation for Q&A as well. So thanks.
So as well as doing automatic grouping using the drag and drop interface, you can now perform manual grouping as well on those data imports. So for example, we can use our standard control arrows to move those items around. We could select a few items, Control G to group that, or select it using the mouse and group them up here from the toolbar and group them as so. Now, another important area of importing data into Quantrix is being able to filter your data before you bring it into Quantrix. So up here, you'll notice there's a drop zone called, which is our filter drop zone. And you can resize this so you can see more or less filters. To make a filter, you can simply take any of these fields. So for example, if we wanted to take the contract type, drop it up in our filter, and we can change that to type is equal to subscription. And now we're just viewing only subscription deals. Likewise, you can add, for example, multiple channels. Just drag channel up here, and you can use the in to just go here and select the available channels. So let's select direct sale and partner sale, select OK, and now we're effectively excluding any web sales and just showing our direct sales and partner sales. We're going to add a last filter, and we can also filter on dates. So if we take something like a purchase date and we change that to greater or equal, we can go here and use the date picker to go back and select anything from January 1st, 2014 onwards. So now we're only going to be looking at data that is after 2014 is either a direct sale and as a subscription. So it's a direct sale, partner sale, and a subscription. Now, if we wanted to modify this logic, we could, for example, say we want to look at all direct and partner sales after 2014, but we also want to look at any subscription sales, no matter when they were posted. So to do that, we could just change this logic. We could change that to an OR and use the parentheses here to apply our logic, press enter, and that then gives us our new update. We can just resize that to make sure we can see the full values. So using this filter drop zone combined with the filter logic, you can create very powerful queries, very easy to filter your data. So
James,
yeah.
Oh, sorry, James. Would you like a couple questions? I have a couple that would be, I think,
Yes.
appropriate at this point. So I believe the answer is yes to this question, but if you can confirm, one of the questions is, in the data browser, can you rename the data sources in the data browser?
In the data browser here.
Yeah, yeah. So like
Yes.
that purchase data or any of those things, can we rename those?
Yep. So you can just come in here and say purchase data CSV, for
Okay,
example, and that will update that. And a
okay,
little bit later, we'll touch on updating the query names and how that relates to the library as well. But yes, you can change these source names as well, and you'll see that that's propagated through here
awesome,
into the actual
great.
import.
And not necessarily related to data import, but Control plus G groups highlighted items. I believe they're talking about a manual group.
Mm-hmm.
What is the shortcut code to ungroup items? Is there one? Or I just didn't know. And you may not either. But
Control Shift G.
Control Shift G.
Yep.
Thank you.
I had to figure that one out. Sorry.
Okay. I couldn't come up with that one on the top of my head, so I
Yep.
appreciate you doing that for me.
Yep. So Control G to manual group, and
Yeah.
then Control Shift G to ungroup.
Okay.
And then
Awesome.
also, as of, I think it was 18.3.2, we added the ability to move items in and out of groups. And to do that, I'm just doing here, moving enterprise in and out, as you can see. So normally, if you just hold Control and press left or right, it will flip to the other side of the group. But if I hold Control Alt and then use the arrow key, I can move it into the group and within the group, and then out the other end.
Awesome.
So again, a really important keyboard shortcut. And these are all documented in the release notes.
Super. One more question, then I'll let you continue. This is when setting up when we were pointing at the CSV file to set up the data source. The question is there an ability to use a relative path as a reference to a local data source?
I will have to check that one.
Okay.
I remember discussing it with the development team.
Okay.
I will have to.
We'll come back to that one. No problem.
Good question.
Okay. Yeah. Great questions. Keep throwing them in the question queue, and please proceed, James. Thank you.
Thanks. So, yeah, where were we? So we said that we want to look at all subscription sales, regardless of the date, but only direct sales and partner sales after 2014. And if we were to just select one of these numbers here, again, you have full drill down capabilities. You can right click on any number, select drill down, select the fields you want to drill down on. So in this case, I'm just interested in the type and the purchase date. I could add as many of these other fields as I want. And in this case, all I want to do is check that indeed the filters worked. So you can see here we have mainly subscription sales with a few perpetuals. And you'll notice that the perpetual sales, i.e. sales which are not equal to subscription, only appear after 2014. There's no perpetual sales before 2014. So it looked like our filter worked. And you can go on and create a data source from this selection, from this drill down, or create a matrix from that. If we confirm our green tick, again, there we have another matrix we can use however we want. So I'm going to create a new import matrix from our same source again. Again, super quick to do that. You just right click on the source, new import matrix. And this time we're going to do a customer analysis. So maybe we'll call this customer analysis. So just as before, I can take this customer dimension, I can drop it in, see a list of all my customers, and now I can just right click on the category itself, data import, sort ascending, and really quickly sort all of those items in ascending order. So what we're doing is we're taking some of the advanced features of data link and putting them into a more approachable data nav-esque functionality. So really you're getting the best of both technologies here. So let's say we wanted to see how much each customer is spending with us. We could take in, for example, our purchase date, and we can drop that over here. And when dropping in a date, we have the option to have a date field quantizer. We can choose from various options. So here I'm going to choose year. We can click OK. That will show us our available years. And then we could also drop the same purchase date in again, and this time quantize based on short month name. So that will just give us, for example, December, Jan, Feb, etc. By doing that, you'll see it's created these two categories. And then the easy thing I can do here is pull this contract amount in, and it will then populate each of those. I'm just going to put this above here so it's a little bit neater. It will show us when each of those purchases came in. So you can see how quick it is to get to these types of analyses. One thing that you could do in Data Link that you couldn't do in Data Nav was have the ability to add a descriptor to a category or to the items within a category. So here, for example, we might want to see how many purchases a particular customer has made in the course of our analysis. So to do this, we simply take, here I'm going to use the ID. I'm going to right click on the ID, and here I have the option Make Item Descriptor. When I choose Make Item Descriptor, I can choose which category I want to put this on. So I'm going to put it on the customer category. And I'm also going to choose the Count Summarizer. So all this is going to do is this is going to count the number of records we have against that customer. I click OK, and here you can see we have an item descriptor populated with the number of contracts that that customer has with us. And this is particularly useful if you need to add that kind of metadata, but you don't want to necessarily add it to a cell to be used downstream in a further calculation. You can just add it here as a descriptor, and that will obviously always be available on anywhere you see this category, as we'll see in just a minute when we start to link these categories. You can also do some interesting things here, like, for example, add the sales rep. We can make an item descriptor on that. Again, choose customer, and we might want to choose last. So in this case, that will now show us the last sales rep who had contact with that customer. So for the last record within the database. So using these powerful options, you can do some quite interesting types of analyses. I'm going to click OK, and that again is a matrix like we can use in any other like any other matrix in Quantrix. So I'm going to switch over to a different model. Here's one I made earlier, just to show you some of the new functionality that we've added around expression-based filters. So this is an advanced technique. You saw how we set up value-based filters before, where we were choosing those values. But here we might want to use the power of Quantrix to add some flexibility to our model. So in order to set up an expression-based filter, all I've got here is a matrix I made. This is not a data import matrix. This is quite simply just a standard matrix with a couple of assumptions which I'm using as my filter. I can go into the configuration, and I can start to filter my data based on these values here. So one thing we want to do is filter the date. So when I add in that date category there, I can choose between. And here's the very important step. You'll see we have a blue V right here. This means that I'm currently inputting a value to be used. I could also choose the field option. That means I could compare a specific field within my filter. Here I'm going to use the expression. I'm going to change both of these to expressions. Now when I click in this box, you'll notice the green background, just how you get when you start to write a formula. What this means is you're in click around mode. So you can very simply go here, select the start date. It validates that that's a valid input. So it's looking for a date input, and it's happy with this date input, and we can add the end date there. Just press enter to confirm that, and you'll see our live preview was on there. So it was updating that as we were setting it. Now, if you're working on a very large data set, you may wish to turn that live preview off, and then you can set up all your filters, press update on demand. So we'll test that now. If we wanted to add a region expression here, again, we just go equals, change that to expression, and then point it to our region item here. Press OK. You'll notice that hasn't been applied yet, and we're looking at all regions right now, but when I press update, that's only going to look at the Asia Pacific region there. I'm going to turn live preview back on so you can see this as it's happening. I'm just going to add the last few filters. So same again, channel equals, and this would have typically had to be done using a complicated SQL expression in the past. So what we're doing is really putting a lot of power into the hands of the business user to achieve what they need to achieve. And there we go, units is between, again, lots of expression filters here, anything between 140 units and 160 units. We apply that, click OK, and now you can see this indeed matches the filter we've got. So we're only looking at Asia Pacific, we're only seeing direct sales, and we're only seeing contracts where the units are between 140 and 160. Now obviously if I was to go and update this and say actually I want to go all the way down to 90 units, when I commit that value, this data import will detect that there needs to be an update. And you can see that's just by this little yellow decorator on the matrix. So in order to update that, I've just got a script, and I'll show you how these scripts are written here. I can just press refresh sales query. That's going to go out, and now we're looking down to 90 units here. So you can get quite a versatile interactive experience here, connecting to that data source, and it's very, very quick at bringing that data in because we're making use of the column store technology. There's a number of other ways to update data import matrices. If I make a change to this, maybe extend this back to 2011, you can select the data import matrix itself and select update to update that data import matrix. Let's make another change. You can select update. Again, if you're selected on the matrix, you can specifically update that data import, or you can choose update all, and that will then update those matrices as well. And the final way to do this, I'm just going to limit this down a bit, via popular request. A lot of users at our conference requested this. You can now update data imports from the tab itself. So you right click on the tab and choose update data import from there. So this makes it really useful when you have a detached tab. So if we detached that tab, had that on a different screen, I can still update that matrix from that screen and just attach it back in there. I'm going to pause for a second and just ask Mike if there's any questions in the question queue.
I think we're pretty good. I've answered a couple while you've been talking, but I think you're good to continue.
Okay, very good. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to connect to a database. I'm just going to create a new model. In fact, actually, no, I'm going to use this model we had before. So this was the model we started where we had 3 queries on that purchase data CSV. In order to connect to a database, it's very simple. Data, import data, database. And you'll see this panel has been redesigned. So we can give this source a name. We could call it my company database. And then you have your saved connections, which have been ported over from your existing connections you may have had in data link. So that's those saved configurations. You also have the option to manage them here. So you can rename, remove them, or load them up. Or you can select any of the database drivers that you have installed on your Quantrix application. We've made it much easier to add a new database. So if you have a JDBC compatible driver, there's lots out there. If you just do a web search, you should be able to find a JDBC compatible driver for your database. You can just select Add New Database from the menu, give it a name, point it at a file, and some of these classes should populate automatically, and add a description there if you need to give yourself something to remember it by. I'm just going to use the standard H2 database, and I'm going to point this at a database file that I have saved locally. I'm going to make sure that's copied across correctly. There we go. And to simply connect to that database, I click Connect. So here we can see the various tables within my sample database. We have that purchase data, we have some lead data. You can add custom SQL. So for example, you can come down here and you can say select, and I'm sure there's going to be some SQL experts on here who are going to laugh at this, but you could say select star where, and then you can use this here to add your custom SQL. So you can still compose that expert style SQL if you have stored procedures, things like that. Here we're just going to keep it simple. We're going to select a table from that data source. I'm going to select lead data. So this is around 45,000 rows. You can choose to discover table joins automatically. However, this does have a performance impact for large databases. I choose OK to connect. That's gone out, and that's brought in those 45,000 rows pretty quickly. If I went and just dragged all of these fields in, dropped them in there, again, you can see the speed of the new data import. It's very, very quick. I'm just going to confirm that, and now we have our lead data in here. We'll call that lead data. So the next focus I want to look at is the data browser. And I just want to make it a little bit bigger so we can see what's going on here. So what we've got now is, you might have noticed there's 3 tabs available in this data browser. There's a tab which is called In This Model, and this will show you all of the data sources that a model is currently connected to, as well as all the queries that are bringing data into the model. So you can give these names. You can change the name of the query. So we might call this our 2D import query. We might call this our sales query. And we might call this one our customer query. And these queries, when they're in the model, are always denoted by the notation, the name of the query, and then where we're putting it in the model. So you can see here this for example, this sales query is going into sales analysis, but if we change this to region analysis, you can see that it keeps that up to date. So it's very easy to go to the data browser and see which query you're using and where it's putting the data. Okay. So we've covered, and this is obviously a tree, so you can expand and collapse this if you have a lot of sources and a lot of queries within your model. So we've covered sources and queries within a model. If I wanted to use these queries and sources in a different model, I can just right-click on a source. I can say Add to Library. And what this is going to do is it's going to add that source to my library. So now I can just create a new import matrix from that, and I can actually do that from any model. You'll notice when I selected just the source, it only added the source itself. So the green hamburger is the source. It didn't add any queries because I hadn't selected those. So here, if I add this query, so this is my lead query, let's give it a name, I add this lead query to my library, it knows what source it comes from, so it automatically rendezvous that query with that source, so you can see it's displayed underneath that source. You can select multiple queries, add these to the library, and because we're adding queries, it knows it needs to bring the source across as well. So you can see it's automatically added that purchase data CSV as a source. So what can we do with these sources and queries once they're in our library? We can open up any new model, navigate to the data browser, go to our library. We can simply select a number of queries, add them to the model, and you can see that very quickly we'll bring in all of those queries, all of those configurations, all of those filters we set up straight into the model. So the reuse of these data import components, you can see it's kept all those filters we set up. This is going to save a lot of time when you've got those queries configured. And you can configure your library file to be a stored location on a network drive. So if you have many Quantrix users all trying to use the same queries and sources, you can have one shared library between everyone. Now I'm just going to change up my order of my demo here. I'm going to show how you export these to a file quickly. So what you can also do is you can select a number of sources. So for example, if I wanted just the lead query and the sales query, and I can select those and export them to a file. Let's export them to this webinar file. I'll call them demo, and that'll be demo.import. So now if I went into a new model, I've got a lot of models open up here, go to our data browser, select from file, you can send this import file to someone else. So this was this demo import file. I select that. You'll see that it's put those specified sources and queries into that file. So it's very easy to just go and add those straight to my model. So this is a great way to, if you have someone who's maybe an expert at setting up these queries and sources, someone can do the hard work and then share it with another user who can then use those queries and sources within their own models. Clean this up a little bit, get rid of some of these. Let's go back to this one. So I also want to show you something particularly awesome. And to do this, I want to make sure I'm connected to the correct cloud. So as you can imagine, we have a lot of clouds here at Quantrix, cloud with a Q. You can bring in data directly from a matrix. So here we've got various matrices within this model. I can go data, import data from matrix. And I'm given a number of options here. I can choose another model, whether it's located in a file, which I can browse to, or a specific URL if it's on a network location. I can choose to select the current model. So you'll see the list of available matrices in here. I can go through, select the different matrices which we have within this model now. And then the new addition, which is super slick and easy to use, is we can just browse our cloud models. So you can see I'm logged into the cloud. I click browse. I can go down here. I can grab an extremely exciting model called oranges. I can click OK. That's going to connect to cloud, show me the matrices available within this model. Select a matrix from there, click OK. And now this is added as a source within my model. So I can just go in here, add my year, add my month, add my metric, and add my data. And there we go. You can use this just like any other data import matrix in Quantrix, except this is now connected up to that cloud model. So that makes connecting to a cloud model extremely easy. It means when you're sharing cloud models within your organization, you're also potentially sharing the ability for that user to access that data within their own models. So I only have a couple more things to show. I just wanted to show you how I built those scripts, because I know that people like to add fancy refresh buttons and update buttons on their canvases to allow users to do workflows such as this. So to do this, I just went to my script manager from the scripting menu. I added two different scripts. I had one called refresh all, and the new syntax that you can see here is refresh all data import matrices. And we also have one called refresh sales query. So if you want to update a specific query, you can choose that specific matrix, that data import matrix, using those pipe notation, dot import data import, sorry, update data import, open parenthesis, close parenthesis. You may have noticed that you can now recolor these, which you couldn't do before, but don't use yellow.